Imagine holding a remote control that governs the entire global economy. You could crash stock markets, send gas prices soaring, and trigger inflation in nearly every country on Earth. Nobody actually owns a remote control like that. But there is a physical location that wields the exact same power. It is a narrow stretch of water between Iran and Oman, measuring just 21 miles wide at its tightest point. It is called the Strait of Hormuz. Every single day, roughly 20 million barrels of oil squeeze through this tiny gap. That is about 1/5 of the world's petroleum liquids consumption. But here's the crazy part. The actual shipping lanes in this corridor are only 2 miles wide in each direction. If a ship gets stuck, or if military tensions boil over, the whole world pays the price almost overnight.
The Strait of Hormuz is the choke point leading into and out of the Persian Gulf.
For decades, engineers and geopolitical strategists have quietly obsessed over a radical $100 billion megaproject to solve this vulnerability once and for all. The idea? A massive artificial canal carved straight through the mountains of the Arabian Peninsula, completely bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. On paper, it sounds like the greatest engineering triumph of the 21st century, but there is a massive catch. This dream project has never broken ground, and the reason why goes far beyond just the astronomical price tag. We will reveal exactly what is stopping this mega project in just a few minutes. But first, we need to understand why the world is so desperate to bypass this waterway in the first place. To understand the sheer panic that the Strait of Hormuz can cause, look at the geography of the Persian Gulf. This body of water is surrounded by some of the most prolific oil and gas producers on the planet: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. When these nations export their energy, almost all of their massive tanker ships must exit through one single door. Recent data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration highlights our staggering dependency on this choke point. Throughout 2024 and 2025, that 20 million barrels per day figure remained stubbornly consistent. That represents over a quarter of total global seaborne oil trade. And it is not just crude. Roughly 20% of global liquefied natural gas, or LNG, also moves through the strait, predominantly originating from Qatar. Asian markets are uniquely vulnerable here. Over 80% of the crude oil flowing through Hormuz is destined for Asia, heavily supplying China, India, Japan, and South Korea. If the strait is disrupted, these economies face instant supply shocks. But the pain wouldn't stop there. Global oil prices are deeply interconnected. A closure in the Strait of Hormuz acts as an economic clock of war. A short disruption causes a massive price shock at the gas pump globally. A prolonged closure translates to crippling inflation, skyrocketing transport costs, and more expensive goods on every store shelf from London to Tokyo. It is a bottleneck that concentrates a terrifying amount of risk. Warships regularly patrol the area. Insurance premiums for oil tankers surge during conflicts, and shipping companies constantly update contingency plans. A single miscalculation could effectively hold the global economy hostage. Because this vulnerability is so obvious, Gulf nations have spent billions looking for a backdoor. They know relying entirely on the strait is a massive strategic liability. Saudi Arabia constructed the East-West pipeline, known as Petroline. This 1,200-kilometer marvel of engineering stretches across the Arabian Peninsula, carrying crude oil from eastern fields directly to the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea. During regional flare-ups in 2024 and 2025, Saudi Aramco ramped up shipments through this route to keep oil flowing. The United Arab Emirates built its own bypass, the Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, which runs directly to the port of Fujairah, circumventing the strait and dropping oil into the Gulf of Oman. But here is the grim reality. Even running these pipelines at maximum capacity, they are merely a band-aid. The combined available bypass capacity of the Saudi and UAE pipelines is estimated between 3.5 and 5.5 million barrels per day. Compare that to the 20 million barrels that normally travel through the strait. You cannot fit a fire hose of global energy demand through a garden hose of infrastructure. At the end of the day, ships remain absolutely essential, and the global economy still relies on that narrow gateway. Which brings us to the ultimate solution. Grab a map and zoom in on the northern tip of Oman. You will see a rugged piece of land jutting into the Strait of Hormuz called the Musandam Peninsula. In several spots, the physical distance between the Persian Gulf on the west and the Gulf of Oman on the east is remarkably short. Only a few dozen miles separate the two bodies of water. The idea is obvious. Dig a trench. If we carved a canal straight through the Musandam Peninsula, ships leaving Saudi Arabia or the UAE could bypass the dangerous choke point entirely, sailing safely through a protected waterway into the open ocean. It looks like an absolute stroke of genius on a flat map, but reality is not flat. And this is the massive catch we promised to reveal. The Musandam Peninsula is not a sandy desert waiting for bulldozers. It is part of the Hajar Mountains, one of the most brutal, unforgiving landscapes in the Middle East. We are talking about sharp limestone peaks rising dramatically out of the ocean, some climbing more than 6,500 feet above sea level. Building a shipping canal here wouldn't mean dredging sand. It would require deleting entire mountains. Modern oil tankers, known as very large crude carriers, are absolute behemoths. To accommodate these giants safely, the canal would need to be incredibly deep, wide, and structurally stable enough to prevent catastrophic landslides. Engineers would need to blast and haul away millions of tons of solid rock. The environmental devastation would be catastrophic, and the cost would be staggering. The Panama Canal expansion cost roughly $5 billion. Carving a mega canal through 6,500-foot mountains could easily exceed $100 billion. But engineering and money are only half the battle. Even if you had unlimited funds and technology, an insurmountable political obstacle remains. The Musandam Peninsula belongs to Oman. Currently, Oman has absolutely no official plan to carve a shipping corridor through its pristine mountains. Their regional development strategy focuses heavily on tourism, port expansions, and local infrastructure. A project of this magnitude would require unprecedented international cooperation. Regional governments would have to reach a unanimous consensus. Global investors would need to finance it, and ironclad long-term security guarantees would be required to protect it. And that brings us to the final, uncomfortable truth. A canal would not eliminate the world's vulnerability. It would simply move the target. Instead of relying on the Strait of Hormuz, global oil flows would depend on a single artificial trench. Like any canal, it could be blocked. A grounded tanker, a targeted attack, or a natural disaster could shut the route down overnight.
Like these two oil tankers off the coast of Iraq, struck by Iranian explosives and set ablaze in the Persian Gulf.
The global economy would just trade one bottleneck for another. Why does the Musandam Canal idea refuse to die? Because it highlights a fundamental truth about our modern world. Global trade is entirely at the mercy of geography. For centuries, natural choke points have dictated the flow of energy, wealth, and power. The canal represents our ultimate dream of outsmarting geography and removing one of the world's most fragile bottlenecks. But mountains are stubborn, and geopolitics are even harder to move. For now, the Strait of Hormuz remains exactly what it has always been, the most vital and vulnerable energy lifeline on Earth.